All right, before I bore you with a bunch of charts that I'll be watching in the chat room on Monday, as a new grandpa, I think I've earned the right to start my video with that beautiful little face. All right, now we'll go into some charts here. TLM is interesting. I believe they have a buyout offer on the table from Repsol. The only thing I know Repsol from is the Honda CBR motorcycle version, which is a cool looking bike, by the way, with the Repsol decals all over it and everything. But I'm not a big fan of trading stocks that have an offer on the table. Just so many things can happen. But having said that, on a pure chart basis, you have this huge move here and then a couple days lower, so it does become interesting. And it's a nice base here, a nice tight range on Friday. And so you have some support from Friday below. And so if this thing were to trade in a narrow range and maybe in the afternoon break its early high, you might just get a quick trade because people pile in thinking, oh, new offer on the table, or I don't even know what the price was for. But something like this, having it on a chart, you can get a quick rip out of it. So it's worth watching. That's TLM. Certainly not my favorite idea of the day. Plug also had this nice 2-day run back here and then a gap up on the third day, and now you're kind of flagging. If you switch to 15s or 30s, you can see the gap up, it held, and then another rally, and now just kind of flagging here. So this one, there it is on 60s. You know, from 420 to 620, that's a really big move, and now it's kind of finding support in the 540 area. So this one goes on long watch. I like the daily chart. It looks good still. Let's see. Now some bounce plays real quick. ARMH had earnings about a week ago and didn't really hold up. It held up on earnings day, but then the next few days it's been down. It is down to like the 8-day moving average. I believe this line here is left over on my chart from pre-market support on the gap up day. So it's down to that now. And again, the 8-day. This one is worth watching for a bounce on Monday. KING. Nothing that pretty about this chart, and there's not a lot of chart to go on because it's a newer issue. But you had this huge move back here, and then a bounce, another bounce. But now you're 3 solid days down. The 18 area was resistance. About a month ago, I suppose. You know, that area was resistance. So if it gets down to that area, I might be watching for a bounce sometimes resistance becomes support. Remember, guys, I'm a day trader, so I just try to find charts that may give a setup on Monday for an intraday trade. I almost never hold stocks overnight. So don't think I'm pointing at all these charts and saying, hey, these are buys right here and hold them for a week. All right, I'm just looking for intraday trades. PXLW, I like this one because you had this big volume spike here and it was grinding higher. It even broke the early high, the high from this day back here about a week later, and then generally something like that fails, that was the top. But look what happens, just a couple days and it's back higher again. But now you're down to an area of support. And so you can see this one, moves nicely at times. So now you're back down to support after 3 solid days down. So this one goes on bounce watch. Kind of reminds me of BIOF, where this one had this pop, and then is kind of bleeding higher. That one, actually, I don't have that one on watch for tomorrow. I think it's ahead of itself, but BIOF that is. But it might be worth watching. All right, anyway, PXLW. Okay, SWKS. Nice gap up here on earnings. 3 days in a row down to the 8-day moving average. Any strength in the market, and this is a potential nice bounce play. Again, I only take bounce plays on specific intraday setups, so I don't just dive into any of these. Now this one's weird. This is kind of based on a thesis, if you will. I don't like this chart per se, but you had this gap up on, I guess that was Thursday, because of RCL, which is Royal Caribbean Cruises, because of the gap up. Well, look what RCL did on Friday. Now let's go back to CCL again. I had a decent long trade in this one on Thursday, but look what, then it gaps down. The disparity between these two, I think there's going to return to equilibrium one of these days. Certainly not, in one day, but I think it's worth looking at. If RCL continues to go higher here, I think CCL could get a nice bounce. So let's go to 15-minute candles. And the early gap up on Friday, it put in its high about 30 minutes in, okay? And then on, that was Thursday, I'm sorry. And then on Friday, it never did break its opening high, all right? But it's in a very narrow range on Friday. So if this one can trade in a narrow range and break its early high, I think this is just good for a trade now. Again, I'm not in love with this chart for a long. It's actually kind of ugly because you had the gap up and then it gapped back down the next day. But you do have nice support at 36. So there's a few different ways to possibly play this. If this were to get down to 36, I love it for a bounce, especially because of the strength in RCL. But I also think this could just give a trade. Again, this is a chart that would have never caught my eye, and it doesn't stand out in any way, shape, or form, except for maybe a bounce off 36 if it wasn't for RCL. So if RCL continues, I think we could get a sympathy play on CCL, even though the chart, again, well, I've already rambled about that chart enough. So that is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being my favorite chart for Monday, that's down about a 2. So it's just one of those that maybe will give me something, but I'm not that interested in it. So I don't want everybody to think that's that important to me. The home builders have been slapped pretty good. RYL has very clear support in the 36 area. And so if the home builders get hit one more day, I love RYL this time, sorry, around 36 for an intraday bounce. So I'll be watching this one around 36 if the home builders get hit another day. And then some other stocks that I just have on watch. Loco, I mean, how much of a chart is there to go on there? But that thing just IPO'd on Friday and just ripped. So that one, remember GoPro, GPRO, IPO'd in just 3 or 4 days. So I think this one is worth having on a chart really going forward for the next several weeks. TUBE, much lower volume stock, but looks like it IPO'd about a week ago, ran up to almost 12, then 3 days down. There was some news on Friday about some insider buying, and so it popped on that. But even Friday's kind of sizable candle for this one, it was only done on 235,000 shares, so it's an IPO and it's pretty thin. So I don't know that I'll trade that one at all. But the news on Friday may get some continuation on Monday. We'll see. And then CLF, this one's interesting. Nice pop back here, and it's really been going sideways again, and another pop here. I'll switch to 60-minute candles. And it becomes kind of interesting because a couple reasons. One, 36 has been resistance. Okay. Not that hard to see here, here. Let's throw some arrows. So you can see where it just had issues with 36. Again here, again here. So, but if it breaks through that, you could get a nice pop, right? Sellers have done a pretty good job up there. And then you also have a little bit of a, sorry about that, a little bit of a trend line here. So if you get above this trend line up in this area, that could be enough to get it started, and then maybe you do break that, I think I said resistance at 16, I'm not sure. You break 1650 is where the resistance is. Then you break that 1650 area and get a nice pop. So you have a decent setup here, especially, I don't know, over 1625. You're kind of breaking that trend line. But really the real breakout is over 1650 with volume. So again, I said this at the beginning of the video, I'm not in love with this list at all. I don't care that much about the overnight list because I know we'll find stuff as the day unfolds. But these are some decent charts to have up, and especially the charts like Ryland Homes with very clear levels, to look for bounces. And you know what? I'm looking at my notes. I also have Broadcom in my notes, BRCM. Gapped up the other day. Let me zoom in a little bit. And it's just 3 days down in a row. Let's look at it on 60s. The 36, probably 36.50 area is kind of interesting. That's, the most recent low back here. But anyway, again, you had a low back here. I feel like I'm just at the point now where I'm babbling. But 37.15 was a low there. It's kind of held support finally on Friday afternoon. So let's kind of, again, this is one of those I just don't love. But Broadcom, let's see if it can hold this area, and then it could give a nice bounce. You noticed after the gap up on earnings, and then I'm going to show you this real quick. These are 5-minute candles. So 15 minutes in was the high of the gap up day. Then there's the 5-minute high of the next day after the gap up. It never broke the 5-minute high. Then Friday, which was the third day after the gap up, there's the 5-minute high. But you know, you're finding support now. So this is maybe you get a narrow range for a couple hours, then a high of day break. I bet you Broadcom gives a nice trade. So that's one way I'll be looking at it. But certainly much more anxious to find volume plays off of this, irrespective of this list, as the market unfolds on Monday. So have a great Sunday evening, and we'll talk to everybody on Monday.